Hope can be an extremely powerful emotion. It can pull us through tough times and help overcome adversity. But hope can be a weakness too, making vulnerable people easy prey for the worst of humans. I've just met one such man, a man who claims to work miracles and heal the sick. He calls himself John of God, but there's nothing godly about him. Thousands of people flock to him, hoping for a cure to their pain, but leave fleeced of their money. You see, John of God's supposed healing isn't free. He's a thrifty businessman making tens of millions of dollars. And worst of all, our government's just granted him a visa, and next month he'll bring his show to Australia. Early light over Abadiania stirs its visitors to a new day of worship. Very soon, a clinically white procession of pilgrims and patients fills the streets of this Brazilian village. Their spiritual and religious compass leads them to the gates of the Casa Dom Inácio. This is who they flock to. He calls himself John of God. But his real name is John Faria, a man who claims miracles. But what happens here is much less divine intervention than downright exploitation. And did you feel anything at all after you had been in this man's presence?
No, nothing. Nothing at all.
So it was nothing more than a show. A bit of hocus pocus.
I'm sorry, it was, yeah. But that was the disappointing part too.
If it were all just a show or some form of entertainment, there would be no harm. But we've been investigating this man's practices around the world and have found a sinister history of police investigations, sexual assault allegations, and secret recordings. It would appear that this man who says he's doing God's work is anything but godly. Two hours from Brazil's capital, John Faria takes to his throne, claiming to cure everything from back pain to cancer. 3 days a week, thousands are in the audience. Many hope for what's called a spiritual surgery. And this is it. With all the confidence, but not skill or training of a surgeon, Mr. Faria becomes medicine man. Of the 70 entities or spirits he says take over his body, one is a trained doctor. They wouldn't allow our cameras to record this macabre medicine, but provided us with their vision. John inserts scissors into a young man's nose. Then a scalpel to a woman's eye, all without anaesthetic. While his believers watch in silent awe, I found it unsettling and cringeworthy. Help me understand how John of God becomes the entities as you describe them.
Yes, he's a remarkable unconscious medium, a very rare thing in mediumship. So it's not him you're talking to there, and it's very difficult for him. If you've ever seen him come out of entity, he really has to fight it off. You know, there's a great shake of the body, and he can tell when he comes back in, takes over again.
So the spirit, you're saying, takes over his body?
Correct.
Australian Robert Pellegrino has lived in Abadiania for 20 years and is one of Mr. Faria's most devoted followers. He too says he's guided by the spirits.
One day the entity just said, my son, you're going to live here. And I scoffed and said, no, bye.
You said the entity told you to move here permanently. Mm-hmm. Which entity are you talking about?
Dr. Augusto Almeides. Yeah, the guy with the little goatee beard.
How long has Dr. Augusto been dead?
He died in the early 1900s, 1930s, no, 35. I don't know exactly.
You know, it sounds a bit crazy that a dead man has told you to move here.
Yeah, well, you get used to it, you know. Yeah, life becomes ruled by spirit.
And the spirits are a real money spinner. Meeting John Ferrier is free, but he often prescribes a visit to these crystal beds. At $25 a session, they earn him around $1.8 million a year. Then there's the blessed water, $1 a bottle. There's a gift shop, and next door to that, a pharmacy. It sells one thing: blessed herbal pills, only available via John of God prescription, apparently. They're $25 a bottle and would make Mr. Ferrier about $40,000 a day. That's more than $14 million a year. How'd we go with the medicine?
So I asked to buy them over the counter.
With ease and a hand-scribbled script, we had respected Australian ER specialist Dr. David Rosengren buy some pills, which are nothing more than passion flower herbs.
Makes the whole thing a mockery, doesn't it?
That is ridiculous. Psychologically, John of God and his people say that the journey here begins the minute you sign up. In other words, the minute you pay up. It's all part of the psychology.
That's right, and so people are committed to the concept of John of God, which then potentially makes it very hard for them to acknowledge that the phenomenon does not necessarily provide what it promises it will.
This is not the first time 60 Minutes has visited John of God. In 1998, Liz Hayes was here. During her story, she met Glenys Perlman, who has MS.
There's so many people that will be so happy to have me walking again. Me, number one, but all my family. That, yeah, I just feel that I want to cry.
Now, 16 years on, we revisited Glenys and her husband Arthur to see if the promised miracle had cured her crippling condition.
Looking back now, Glenys, how do you describe that journey to Brazil to see John of God?
When I saw him, he just went zoom, 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 and that was it.
Did you ever go back?
No. Decided not to go because I didn't feel any effect whatsoever. Didn't help me one iota.
How did that leave you? Were you disappointed?
Disappointed. Of course you are disappointed. You hope to be able to walk and get better, but that didn't happen.
What were you hoping for by seeing him? And
be able to walk again.
But Glenys's condition continued to deteriorate after her visit to John of God. The Perlmans spent more than $5,000 visiting Brazil, but now Glenys is unable to walk at all and dependent on Arthur.
It's a thing called hope. Sensibility, reasoning, goes out the window. What is sad here isn't me, it's the poor person who's got a wife or a partner or a husband who's got MS or any other shocking disease, who can't afford it, who hasn't got the money, and they scrape together the money because it's not cheap, it's dear, it's expensive.
We also followed up on Nicola, who had breast cancer.
The spirit entity declared her cured of her breast cancer.
She died in 2003. None of the other people featured in Liz's story have improved either.
You go there, get touched on the head, like the Pope does, and nothing happens, and you've done your dough. It's wrong. Were we conned? Yes, in my opinion we were.
Coming up, exposing a con.
Is this more about money than it is miracle?
Face to face with John of God.
Then, have you ever sexually assaulted any of your followers?
His is ungodly conduct.
No. Just please don't.
That's next on 60 Minutes.
His devotees flock in their thousands to a remote corner of Brazil, hoping to be healed of an illness or affliction. Some are looking for spiritual guidance. Whatever they're looking for, it's not for free. As we've seen, John of God is big business, and he's bringing his roadshow to Australia. Would you like to come into here, please? Thank you.
It's rare for Mr. Ferrier to do interviews, for a good reason. He has a lot to hide.
Can I ask before we start asking questions, am I speaking with John of God now or an entity?
With John, indeed.
How does the healing work?
This is the power of God, because I don't cure anyone. Who cures people is God.
There is a big business around your spirit here. Is this more about money than it is miracle?
These are questions that were in the list, were they?
Do you think they're fair to ask?
I don't think that we're going to go into...
It was at this point Mr. Ferrier and his minders decided he didn't want to answer my questions. Speaking in Portuguese, his staff decided he should leave.
We're trying to describe fully and understand fully what goes on here. These are natural questions a journalist would ask.
Only earlier, they were more than happy to show us the parade of followers who'd been moved by their experience at John of God's hands. Even some who said they'd been healed.
He's been healed today. He's been healed.
I watched all this with emergency specialist Dr. David Rosengren, who says these people are often vulnerable when modern medicine has failed to offer a cure.
Recent research into placebo confirms that you can, through the power of belief, trick your mind into believing certain things are happening. So people may believe that they've been cured, but there's been no objective evidence of that provided, which surprises me for an organisation that's existed for 50 years plus, that they don't actually have clear documented evidence of a single cure at any stage.
Well, that might say something.
That it might say something.
But it's the surgeries that have Dr. Rosengren most concerned.
Yeah, I mean, it's horrendous to watch. And there's this urge that you feel like you need to get up and take that scalpel from his hand and say, you know, this is criminal, this is wrong. Just modern medical world could not condone this behaviour in any way whatsoever.
Also not condoning his behaviour, the Catholic Church. Despite the fact John of God says on his website, "I do not cure anybody. God heals."
John of God doesn't have any official affiliation with the Catholic Church.
Father Brian Lucas represents the Catholic Church in Australia.
I think we've always got to be very sceptical about people who seek publicity, more so if there's a lot of money involved. When we have claims of miracles and faith healing, a dose of what we might call a healthy scepticism is a good thing.
But Mr. Ferrier's business and personal affairs need serious scrutiny, not just scepticism. In recent years, 2 deaths at John of God's compound warranted police investigations, but no charges were laid. And in 2010, US detectives investigated allegations of sexual assault allegedly committed by him. In this report from the Sedona Police Department, the victim states John Ferrier took her hand and placed it on his genitals. She also says he tried to pull down her skirt.
Somebody is saying that John harassed sexually somebody while he was here in Sedona.
Later, a friend of Mr. Ferrier's allegedly met with the victim asking her to drop the complaint. This is an apparent recording of that conversation.
I really need to be able to say that you do not have anything against us. I need you to put this in writing. That there is nothing that you are saying against us, against the Casa, and against John.
The case never made it to court. Mr. Ferrier returned to Brazil, where he has 9 children to 3 wives. Well, let me ask you then, have you ever sexually assaulted any of your followers? Could anyone interpret that for me? His team refused to translate my question. John of God, could we ask you a few more questions, please?
No.
I mean, these are...
No.
Just to properly understand exactly who you are. Suddenly silent, he waited until he was around the corner, away from the camera, to insult our interpreter as she was translating my question. Have you ever sexually assaulted any of your followers? When she asked if he'd sexually assaulted anyone, he stared her down and said, "Your mother." So he responded to my question, of which there are very serious allegations and police records, that he insulted you.
Yes.
And you're just translating the question for me.
Yes, I was just translating.
That's a good mark of a man, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Later, his minders were clearly not prepared to explain his actions then or in the past. The simple truth of it is, John is coming to Australia. We're allowed to ask fair questions about who is this man coming to Australia. On the record, there are allegations of sexual assault. But perhaps realising his ungodly comments were bad for business, he returned, demanding to see our tape.
I want to watch because I don't know what you have recorded there. I want to watch to see what has been recorded.
He wants to see what we have recorded.
No. Tell Zhao what he said around the corner was thoroughly offensive. You suggested sexual assault of her mother in a very cruel and quite ugly accusation against her. You were being incredibly rude.
I want to watch what is recorded. No, I will watch it. No, I will watch it.
No. Just please don't. It's this attitude John Ferrier will bring to Australia next month, where he plans to put on a show. Do you believe John of God should be allowed to come to Australia?
Absolutely not. I can't believe that the Australian government would welcome into our country someone who pretends to provide medical treatments and medical cures in such a barbaric and deliberately manipulative way.
You can't question the faith of those who visit John of God. For many, it's the only hope they have left. But what should be questioned is John Ferrier, the man, and his questionable character. After spending a few days with this so-called miracle man, I left feeling that John of God is more John the Con.
It's a big con. And I feel quite sad for anybody that is going to go down that path. I really do feel sad.
Because you've been there.
I've been there.
And you're sitting here right now.
And I feel like crying for the people that are going to go down that path.
You do.
I really do. I didn't think I would get that emotional, but I do feel that.
Hello, I'm Tara Brown. Thanks for watching. To keep up with the latest from 60 Minutes Australia, make sure you subscribe to our channel. You can also download the 9Now app for full episodes and other exclusive 60 Minutes content.